My dress shoes clack loudly on the polished marble floor. Everyone is quiet. They're waiting for me to get to the right spot so that I can start speaking. And when I get there, I'm going to do something that I've never done in church before. I'm going to curse loudly and proudly. This funeral is the culmination of an exhausting 10 days that saw my mother go from the hospital to home hospice care, and then all of her children and grandchildren come from all over the country to be with her. We would take turns sitting with her in the bedroom, and we'd talk, and she would go in and out of consciousness, and sometimes she'd participate, and sometimes she wasn't. But we all knew that she was happy just knowing that everybody was there. Lots of people came and went. Neighbors from the old neighborhood, bridge friends, work friends, nurses, social workers. But you can't have 6 kids and 15 grandkids like my mother did and not have a good relationship with chaos. She would embrace it. And she took joy in it, all the while being the calm eye of the storm. But as I sat there next to her, all I could think about was how the world as I knew it was ending. After she passed, my brothers and I went to the funeral home to talk to the funeral director. He gave us some platitudes of condolence, and then he tried to sell us some really expensive memorial items. My brothers and I spent a lot of time saying no. My mother was a frugal woman, and we wanted the funeral to reflect who she was as well as her wishes. To prepare the eulogy, I talked to my brothers and sisters, and I talked to their kids about what memories they had of my mother. And my niece, Mary, she told me a story about how she had been sitting and talking with her cousins about when they were little, and they used to play in the lobby of my parents' condominium complex. And it was a big space, so it was good when you're little because you can run around and you can make a lot of noise, and it was fun. But it was a big place, and it was kind of echoey, and a lot of the residents, they didn't really like the fact that these little kids were running around. So while Mary was playing with her cousins once, she was about 4 years old, this woman, a resident, walked up to her and waggled her finger in Mary's face and said, "You are an ugly, horrible little girl." And Mary said, "What kind of a person says that to a little kid?" "A real bitch," my mother says. Everyone thought that she was sleeping, but she wasn't. She heard it. And that's not the normal language for my mother, but it shows how protective she was of her family. And I knew as soon as I heard that story, I needed to include it in the eulogy. I grew up going to that church every Sunday, and I hated every minute of it. It took me a while to figure out why, but I realized it was the rampant hypocrisy. I was in high school, and I realized that I was there on Sunday morning, and the assholes from the party on Saturday night, they were the ones playing the role of the most devout Catholics in church on Sunday morning. And then I went to a Catholic college. You could drink as much vodka as you wanted there, but condoms were forbidden. And then the president of that college, he got into trouble because he had an affair with his secretary. And oh, did I mention he was a priest? And this is, of course, before the sex scandal became public. I remember how exhilarated it felt the first time I skipped church. My parents let my brothers take me to church, and we all got in the car. We were quiet. Nobody said anything because nobody wanted to go. And we drove to the church, and when we got to the church, we kept on going, and we went for a hike, and it felt great. Sure, I suffered crippling guilt later on, but for that 1 second, I just felt liberated. It's just that all the masses were all about depressing things, and I couldn't understand why we had to focus on death and the sins and confession, which was this whole other level of hell. So we're at the funeral now. And just before we're getting ready to start, the funeral director comes up to me and he says, I have to tell you something. I forgot to mention this before, but the Monsignor, he wanted me to tell you that this is a mass. So when you tell the eulogy, you have to be respectful. So no bad language, and you need to keep it on time. I'm just about to go into my mother's funeral, and the Monsignor, via the funeral director, is trying to tell me what I can and can't say about my mother. Now I relish more than ever that I'm going to say the word bitch with gusto in that big old church. And I mount the steps to the pulpit, and down before me, I see all of my family and so many friends. and I start the eulogy, and I start telling some anecdotes that I think do a really good job of telling everybody what a wonderful woman my mother was. And then I get to the part, the story with the B word. And I take a deep breath, and I don't tell it. Maybe it's because I couldn't. I mean, it was a eulogy, and it's not supposed to be about me and my relationship to the church. But maybe I'm just telling myself that. Maybe I couldn't tell it because that was a line I just couldn't cross. Maybe I couldn't say that word in church with the Monsignor right next to me because I just couldn't do it, even if it was a story about my mother that made sense. I know that my mother would have said, if she could, that she was proud of me, because that's what moms do. But sons are supposed to be strong. And even though it's been almost 4 years, I can't stop thinking about the fact that in that very important moment, I wasn't strong enough. Thank you.